Hello there, my RPG lovers, and welcome to another video. Crimson Desert is a very ambitious upcoming action adventure with RPG elements. This game kinda disappeared in 2020 after that game overview trailer dropped. Only in 2023 they came back with another trailer that blew people away. Even in the past, Crimson Desert had some pretty good gameplay videos, but this was something else. This game was supposed to be an MMORPG, but Pearl Abyss changed their mind and decided to turn it into a story-driven, single-player action-adventure. This won't be the first time where I talked about this game or compare it to Dragon's Dogma. I had a similar video in the past, back when Dragon's Dogma 2 wasn't even released. And even though I loved Dragon's Dogma 2, that game definitely felt undercooked in some major areas. Like the story, which really sucked, the variety of enemy types could have been a lot better, we expected some more content and features like the hard mode, etc, etc. You can check out my full review if you want to hear me talk about all the positives and negatives. That was kinda ironic because we could describe the first game in a very similar manner. A lot of people felt disappointed because of the high expectations for the sequel, because everyone knew the crazy potential of this IP, except Capcom, I guess. Even so, the gameplay in Dragon's Dogma 2 is very unique and very polished. I had around 125 hours invested in this game and I'm just waiting for a strong enough reason to play again, like the hard mode or a full-blown DLC, or if I just get in the mood to play it. When one of the earlier Crimson Desert trailers dropped, I was like, finally, we're getting another RPG besides Dragon's Dogma where we can climb on big monsters. Even though there are only a handful of these scenes in those old trailers, I was very hyped for the gameplay because it looked like it's going to have some proper depth. Climbing on big monsters in RPGs is a very rare feature that only Dragon's Dogma had, and maybe before that we had Shadow of Colossus, which was not an RPG by the way, but still, people connect those features mostly to Shadow of the Colossus, and then we finally got an RPG that tried to do something similar in 2012, and Dragon's Dogma kinda went under the radar back then, but when I first experienced that game back in 2012 and see how the climbing mechanics are very cool, I was convinced this is going to be a new standard for action RPGs, open world action RPGs with a lot of budget, but it turns out I was wrong. That never happened, unfortunately, probably because it's very hard to implement, even for very big studios, or just they didn't care. It was basically a revolutionary feature in open world action RPGs that nobody cared about. This could have been a revolutionary feature in open world action RPGs, but sadly, we never got to see it again until we got another Dragon's Dogma game. Well, that's not technically true because we had Monster Hunter games, which also had its own kinda unique climbing system for monsters, but it was very different compared to Dragon's Dogma, and these games are by the same studio, by the way. So you can only imagine my excitement when I first saw Crimson Desert and some clips where you can climb on monsters, and not just as a gimmick, but actual combat mechanic. In the meantime, Dragon's Dogma 2 came out, and this game introduced a very advanced physics-based engine which only further improved these climbing mechanics. You could seamlessly land on monsters by just using the jump mechanic or some special ability that your character can do, and you would land on the monster if the physics makes sense. For example, my warrior could land on top of the dragon's head with some special abilities, and this always felt really epic. And if you think about it, this kinda made sense from the physics side of things, and it made the game way more immersive. Not just when it comes to climbing big monsters, but just interacting with the environment. It felt really immersive to me. Now, I don't think the Crimson Desert is going to be exactly the same like Dragon's Dogma 2, but we could see a lot of attention to detail when it comes to physics-based mechanics in Crimson Desert trailers. For example, here we can see Cliff climbing this tree monster, or whatever it is. It looks pretty smooth. Or how about the White Horn boss fight, where the player just decides to start climbing and stabbing the shit out of this beast. It doesn't look scripted. It looks very similar to Dragon's Dogma 2 mechanics, where you could just start climbing on monsters as long as you have the stamina. There is also a 4-minute boss fight video, where the whole point of this fight is climbing on his back that looks like a hill. This was a bit gimmicky, but you can probably see what I'm trying to say here. It's definitely not just a simple climbing system that we can see in many games nowadays, but it's actively being used in combat as well. However, I would be very surprised if they manage to go so far with this system as Dragon's Dogma 2 did. I'm pretty sure they won't. But climbing mechanics is not the only reason why I think this game has similar vibes to Dragon's Dogma. Some other parts of Crimson Desert's gameplay seem to be very physics-based as well. It has a lot of physics-based mechanics that seem to work very seamlessly in combat. For example, we can see how the body of some enemies bounces around when you use some of your abilities. These kinds of mechanics are very immersive if you ask me. They improve the feeling of the combat and the feeling of immersion at the same time. That being said, I don't think this game will come even close to Dragon's Dogma 2 level of physicality in combat, but it doesn't have to. That's because Crimson Desert has its own set of unique features in combat, which are obviously inspired by WWE. Yeah, apparently our boy Cliff here is a WWE champion because he can use some crazy WWE moves, throw people around, slam them on the ground, etc, etc. There are a lot of moments where we can see Cliff being a total savage and performing these WWE moves. It seems like these moves are going to be useful, very useful against human enemies in the game, so you can hopefully see what I mean by physics-based mechanics and how they improve the sense of weight in the combat and how they improve the immersion as well. Speaking of which, it seems like we can destroy a lot of things on the map, which further adds to these effects. I think everyone would agree that destructible environment in games is very cool. Now, all of this combined will make the combat feel way more impactful than your typical third-person action open-world RPG. Once again, it might not come close to that Dragon's Dogma 2 level, but still, it has its own thing going on here and it looks pretty good. In 90% of gameplay footage for this game, we can see Cliff fighting with a sword and shield only. This kinda makes me worried about the variety of playstyles in the game. Then again, there are some clips where you can see how Cliff uses some two-handed weapons, I guess, and I'm pretty sure this inventory slot is going to be reserved for such weapons. Some of the clips show Cliff wearing a big axe on his back, so I'm going to assume that this slot is reserved for big two-handed weapons. There are some very short clips where Cliff is using a different weapon, but it's hard to see what's going on here. This looks more like a unique ability, rather than a fighting style with a different melee weapon. Speaking of item slots and items in general, there are some very cool armor sets that the player will be able to obtain. In the newest trailer, we can see some very shiny knight armor. I hold visual progression in very high regard, so I'm really hoping they manage to create a good character progression in general, along with a great visual progression. Cliff also has a bow and some very cool bow abilities that we can see in this particular boss fight. It seems like we're going to learn unique boss abilities upon killing them, which kinda reminds me of boss weapons from Souls-like games. Back when Dragon's Dogma 2 got announced, I expected to see a very crazy trailer from Capcom. That's because I expected a very ambitious open-world action RPG, which Dragon's Dogma 2 turned out to be, don't get me wrong, but not to the extent that I expected. Like I said, I love that game, but I just think it could have been a lot better and much bigger. Not when it comes to the sheer size of the world, I'm not talking about that. I just think it could have been a lot more ambitious. I don't know, I just expected to see some very crazy features, like we could see in some Crimson Desert trailers. Come to think of it, it's kinda hard to believe that this game even exists, so I won't hold my hopes up until I get to try out the game for myself, but watching at these trailers is just, I don't know, it's crazy. They have a lot of features, and what's even crazier, they managed to turn an MMORPG into a single-player action-adventure with so many features. It definitely feels a little bit too good to be true, but let's hope for the best. So let's see here, we have a huge open world, which you can explore on foot with a mount. You can fly, you can also climb like in Assassin's Creed, but you can also fight monsters like in Dragon's Dogma. There is also a mounted combat system as well. We could see a full-blown siege in one scene, there is fishing, and so on. You can see what I'm talking about here. They crammed a lot of features into this game. Allegedly. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. Remember that dragon clip from a couple of years ago? That shit was crazy. Speaking of dragons, Cliff can also ride them, like we could see in the newest trailer, and you can also fly with a special cloak, like we said before. When I mentioned Dragon's Dogma 2 before, these kinds of trailers is what I had in mind, and judging by everything we could see so far about Crimson Desert, this game could definitely fill that hole that Dragon's Dogma 2 left in me. Take that back. And judging by everything we could see so far about Crimson Desert, this game could definitely be what Dragon's Dogma 2 was supposed to be, at least in my mind. Maybe my expectations for Dragon's Dogma 2 were a bit unrealistic, but come on, it's Capcom, they have a ton of money, so it's I don't think it's unrealistic to expect some crazy sequel that we waited for, I don't know, 12 years, but still, like I said, I love that game. I'm eagerly expecting a DLC or a hard mode or whatever content updates. I'm going to come back and play the game again. We obviously don't know how this game is going to turn out, but there are some very good signs here. I mean, who else is releasing a 50-minute long unedited gameplay video? That's kinda crazy. We could see various things in this gameplay video, like how brutal this game can be from time to time. It was kinda surprising.
Better look to the next Greymane.
Cliff gets absolutely fucked up in the beginning and he apparently dies. After that he wakes up in some village and it seems like your main quest is to reunite with your buddies from the Greymane clan. Greymane clan are good guys who are keeping the balance in the world, and you have this other clan who is not so good. That's pretty much everything I got from the story so far. Cliff visits a strange place in the sky called the Library of Providence, where he learns how to fly. There is a very epic scene where he jumps and you can clearly see how big the open world is. The draw distance is very impressive and the world looks great in general. It seems to me like a very busy open world where something is constantly going on, judging by that 50-minute video at least. The abyss, or these dimensions that Cliff is visiting, reminds me a little bit of Assassin's Creed and how they used to do Abstergo segments. The skies in this game seem to be filled with locations to visit as well, although I'm not sure how interactable these segments are. It looks like the exploration in this game could be very fun. Now, if all of this seemed too good to be true, well, we won't have to wait for long to find out. Crimson Desert is coming out in the late 2025, but we still don't have the exact release date. This has to be one of my most, if not the most anticipated game of the year. If they manage to pull this off, we're going to have an epic open world action adventure to play. I will try my best to not get extremely hyped for it, so I don't get disappointed. Anyway, tell me your thoughts and opinions about Crimson Desert in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more content like this. And if you want to go a step further, consider supporting your boy by becoming a YouTube channel member or a Patreon. Huge thanks to all my current supporters, and I'll see ya in the next one.